draft the plaint? Is a very typical question which is normally asked by the students. You are not by the students, even the upcoming lawyers or the new lawyers which come. And what are the ingredients of the plaint? I have earlier always stressed and told people that we should always look into the procedure part. The Civil Procedure Code 1908 is a complete code in itself, that how the plaint will be drafted and how the plaint contents. Drafting is content under Order 6, that is called pleadings. We are not discussing that at this point. We are discussing, you know, the pleadings and how it has to be placed in the plaint. Plaint Order 7 starts of the plaint. Let's look to the book. It will be very easy, okay, how the plaint is drafted, because there is a columns are given. You need not even struggle much about it. Order 7 Rule 1 is the plaint. The first point they say is you must mention the name of the court in which the suit is brought. You must be aware of the hierarchy of the court under section 3 of the CPC. Hierarchy of the court means you are going to the civil judge junior division, or you are going to the civil judge senior division, or you are filing in a special court. But I am just differentiating that there are special acts like Family Court Act. There are special acts in which you have to do certain formalities in filing the same. But as far as CPC is concerned, you have to look first to the hierarchy and then start thinking where the plaint has to be placed. So we have to put the name of the court in which the suit is brought. So in that connection, I have told the courts you have to choose. And you have to choose special court or a civil court. We are talking about the civil court. If we will go to the special court, we will see whether special court is created under what enactment, and in that enactment whether civil procedure code is barred or not, because special enactment are created so the people should not suffer under the wrath of the civil long procedure of the civil procedure code. So you have to look to that special enactment. In special enactment, sometimes they only attract certain provisions and do not attract all the provisions. So if we are talking about the special act, so we are missing the goal. We have to first write the name of the court. Second is you have to write suit number. Suit number, you have to leave a space for the number which will be granted by the computer and by the court, and then after you have to put the year. Thereafter, the next you have to put the name, description and place in residence of the plaintiff. If you are plaintiff, you have to put your name, your age, your parentage, your residence. And then we have to write verses. Means the court should know you are making a attack against who. That is called defendant. After writing verses, you have to write the name of the defendant. Name, description and place of residence of the defendant. So there should be correct address. So the summons should go there. There is a different chapter for sending the summons and service of that. We will discuss it later on, because we can't learn everything in one breath. Now next is, if the plaintiff is a minor or of unsound mind, a statement to that effect has to be made. Possibly the plaintiff may be minor, he may be Raja and he is a minor, so the suit has to be filed through guardian. For that, different provision has been given how the guardian is appointed. If I twist to that it will take more time. We will discuss it later on, how the guardians are appointed by the court if he doesn't have a guardian, or there is a conflict between guardian, proposed guardian and the minor. If there is the person plaintiff has to give that the plaintiff is a minor and I am the natural guardian of the child or de facto guardian of the child. And you have to also show that you have been appointed guardian by some competent court, or you are just stating that I am the guardian. After that, this also applies to unsound mind people. And for unsound mind, appointment of guardian has a different story. Judge has to summon the unsound mind person, and the judge will talk to him. If he feels though he is not of unsound mind and this is wrongly written, or he can look after his case, he will not appoint the guardian. And he can even send that man to the hospital to just to know whether he is of unsound mind or not. Because what happens if you have enemy of somebody and you want that the case should not be won, you appoint somebody as a guardian of the sound mind, and in fact he is not of unsound mind, and you say, but he talks like this, the people talks like it, but the court sees whether he is competent to protect his interest in the case or not. Only this. If a man can protect, he knows I am the plaintiff and it is my property and I am filing a suit against the defendant, he is able to protect his interest, so the court will not declare him as the unsound mind. Court will not appoint his guardian. The fact is, now what you have to do now, para-wise, you have to write your facts. What has been done, what the defendant has injured you, how you are aggrieved from the defendant, such as you are filing a suit for money, you have got a hundi or you have got a pronote with you, simplest matter that you will say that you have lent a money. You are a money lender under the Registered Act, and the so and so person, defendant, came to you along with two persons that he needs the money. I have given him 500 rupees as a loan. He has to pay 2% per annum, and he has reduced all these things into the document. And thereafter that period expired that I have demanded, he didn't pay. Then I served a notice calling upon him to pay my dues along with interest. He has refused to pay, so I have come to court. So you have to write your facts. Similarly, if husband is filing a suit for divorce against the wife, you have to give the ingredients, how is agreed from the wife. Even the wife is filing, so she has to disclose all those, that's called pleading. They have to plead effectively, which shall be contested by the other side. That is very material, which is missing in this book. You have to write. Next is the cause of action. What is the cause of action is a very simple matter to understand. And when it arose, why this word is when it arose? Because the limitation act will already come into play. I will tell you what things you have to vouch when plaint is ready. What you have to vouch thereafter. So you have to put cause of action. Cause of action when arose. Cause of action is about the, as I said about the money suit, the day defendant came to you for demand of money, first cause of action arose on that day. He reduced the documentary evidence, this is the second cause of action. The period expired for payment or he didn't pay on demand, this is the third cause of action. You served a notice, this is another cause of action. It has been served on the defendant, you have to see. It is not simply giving notices, nothing. It should see that it has been served, or the envelope sent by the registered post has come back refused by the defendant, then there is a cause of action. And when ultimately he refused to pay, this is all cause of action. We should not fear that we should give only 1 or 2 or 3 notes. You are permitted to write all the dates of the cause of action. It grants a brief sight to the court to understand the position and to see whether the suit is barred by limitation or not. That we will be discussing in this chapter now. Thereafter is whether set off or relinquishment of a portion is being left or not. I am a plaintiff, I have to pay your money also, and he has to pay my amount, so I can set off. Yes, this amount I am leaving, I have to recover it from that place. Suppose there was 500 rupees and I have to take 200 rupees from him. So I will say, I will not take 200 rupees, give me 300 rupees. Or he has supplied a wood at my house of 200 rupees and that cost of wood will be adjusted. I am setting it off. Or if you want to relinquish, suppose there is a big amount and you feel that the defendant cannot pay, so you can relinquish your amount. You can say, I don't want. Waive. You can release him of the liabilities. That has also been mentioned in the plaint. And now is about the counterclaim also you can do in the plaint. That will come in the written statement, and you have to vouch at the advance whether the defendant will file some counterclaim against you or not. Then there is a relief. What you want. You have to write, it is therefore respectfully prayed. Following reliefs be granted in favor of the plaintiff and against the defendant. Number Roman 1, a small a, that is sum of rupees so and so be awarded in favor of the plaintiff against the defendant. along with interest at the rate of so and so. Then you can ask for any other relief which the court consider proper to grant you. Court may grant you not 500 rupees, but court may grant you 200 rupees looking to the defense of the defendant. So you have to always ask any other relief which is possible or which can be granted in favor of the liability be kindly granted. Then you ask for a full cost of the suit because you have spent money. If you don't ask, you will not get. These are the ingredients, but you have to also make a class of valuation and jurisdiction and payment of court fees. This has to be mentioned before cause of action. Which court has a jurisdiction? And what is the valuation of the suit and what court fees is payable on it? This attracts three different acts: Limitation Act, Court Fees Act, and the second is jurisdiction. For that we have got a different enactment to see. But you have to see there is no inherent lack of jurisdiction. So that is a separate chapters and a big chapter. So here you have to simply vouch a limitation, jurisdiction and valuation and the payment of the court fees. For payment of Court Fees Act is there. For limitation, Indian Limitation Act is there. For jurisdiction, there are special provisions in the CPC. And even Section 9 bars certain suits. You can't file a civil suit because Section 9 bars it. That we will look at later on. But you have to furnish it. There are other provisions also in money suit. And now when the subject matter is immutable property. For immutable property, you have to go to the different sections of the CPC. How the suit for immutable property is filed. You have to give the details, boundaries of the immutable property. And just a landlord wants to file a suit against the tenant, you have to see that whether this court has jurisdiction or not in which I am filing. So that point is also there. Next is Rule 4, when you file a suit under representative capacity. Suppose you have to file not a money suit, but a suit in the public interest. That is called what is they people PI, public interest litigation under the Constitution. But you can also file a suit in representative capacity. I have any grievances that exist. I am filing this suit on behalf of the entire Dehradun or entire public or entire Delhi. You can also file a suit in representative capacity. And in the plaint, you have to also show what defendant has interest in the suit. It should not be like that the defendant should come and say, I have no concern with the suit. I am not a man, he has given money to him. So you have to show his interest. And if you see the suit has not been filed within the period prescribed by law, then you have to give reasons in the plaint that why you want exemption from the Limitation Act. Thereafter, you have to state relief very specifically, as we have discussed earlier, as a relief what it should be very clear. And for every pleadings, you should have a separate relief. Suppose you have got 3-4 demands from somebody. So you have to give separately relief number 1, relief number 2, relief number 3, relief number 4. You have to give. Such as you have lent out or mortgaged your house to somebody, you have mortgaged, and then you want that paper should be returned. So you say that my property should be returned to me, there should be separately, I paid the amount, a declaration should be made for that. So there should be separate relief in drafting the plaint. We are discussing about the plaint only, because there are certain things which you have to vouch, which I am discussing on the way. Thereafter, what will happen? You take the plaint to a judge. Everywhere there are registrars of the court. In Haryana, Punjab, they are called Munsarims. You give the plaint to him. He will give his report. Whether these ingredients given in Order 7 Rule 1 are complete or not. Simply he has to give this report. And he has to keep in mind whether the suit is barred by limitation, jurisdiction and court fees is paid or not. The administrative officer of the court will see whether the valuation is proper, is within the pecuniary jurisdiction of this court where he is sitting, and whether the suit is barred by limitation. If barred by limitation, the explanation has been given for extension. You have to simply give an explanation. Only the administrative officer will see whether explanation is there or not. Rest the judgment decide whether explanation is incorrect or not. So you have to give simply explanation. The registrar or munsif or administrative officer will see only three things and make his report. The suit is within jurisdiction. Valuation is under court has pecuniary jurisdiction at this point, and court fees paid is proper. Then it is placed before the judge, because judge has to apply his mind. The judge will also read the report plain, and then thereafter he will decide whether the suit should be admitted or not. He will pass a proper and effective order that plaintiff is admitted, issue notices to the defendant, because it is not easy to call everyone to the court. Tomorrow he comes and says the suit is barred by name, prima facie, there everything, your administrative officer has given a wrong report, and why you have summoned me? So it requires application of mind in summoning the defendant. Then he will summon the defendant. If the administrative officer finds some fault in it, I don't have a pecuniary jurisdiction, sir, just such as in some states, the civil judge junior division has 2 lakh, 5 lakh, 1 lakh jurisdiction, and civil judge senior division has unlimited jurisdiction. And in Delhi, the suits are also filed in the High Court. There is a limited jurisdiction to the district judge in civil courts at Delhi, and then for proper amount you have to file a suit before the High Court. So this at this level, the administrative officers, you see, what he will say, you move an application, I will return the plaint to you, because court fees is fixed. The court can return the plaint to you, and court will ask upon you, rather you should ask upon the court that I am sorry sir, I have filed the suit here, pecuniary jurisdiction is above in the suit plaint, pecuniary jurisdiction above the jurisdiction of the court. Then court can also return the plaint and can fix a date of another court. You can pray that this suit I will file before civil judge senior division on that date. The court will fix a date, that date is fixed, and the suit should be filed before senior division. That is also for the 10. Now the dangerous section is 11. Rejection of plaint. Before this rule comes, we have to see what we should vouch. We have drafted the plaint. First thing we have found is, are we going to a proper court, pecuniary jurisdiction? Are we coming to the court which has a jurisdiction according to law? One thing. Second thing, then you have to see that your suit is not barred by time. And then you have to see at this juncture whether the suit is against the government or not. If the suit is against the government, a different notice is required under section 80 CPC. So your suit will fail. If you are filing a suit against the government, you must go to the sections and read the section which provides that you have to give the notice to the central government and to the state government. Which will, if the defendant is central government, Union of India, give a notice to the central government. If the defendant is the state, you give a notice to the collector and to the secretariat of the state. So this thing you have to vouch after drafting the plaint what defects I have made out. Even though you are in practice, because throughout the life lawyer practice, he never becomes a master of it. This is the idiom everywhere. So you will be practicing, I will be practicing, we will be learning from each other. We will never become a master of practice, because nobody can, because everyday law changes. Everyday judgment changes his view. So under 7 rule 11, now the judge will see whether your suit contains the cause of action. If it does not disclose a cause of action, he will say rejected your plaint. The second point is where the relief claimed is undervalued. He says, I don't have, he can reject it and return it also. And the plaintiff, on being required by the court to correct the valuation within a time to be fixed by the court, fails to do so. Suppose the civil judge junior division has jurisdiction about 5 lakhs. By mistake you have written 50,000. Or the jurisdictions of the 50,000 you have written 5 lakh, the judge says there is a typing error. You move an application and correct. So after giving you an opportunity, you will reject it. Okay, you correct this error. What I am saying is, correct the valuation within a time to be fixed by the courts. Time will be fixed to correct the typing error or name of the court or these things. Next point is where the relief claim is properly valued. The plaint is written upon the insufficiently stamped. Court fees is not given, or you have valued the suit in a very technical and clever manner. That the valuation of the suit has been undervalued and the court fees has not been paid, it is one of the ground. Where the suit appears from the statement the plaint to be barred by any law. From the statement of their claim, I am just requesting and discussing you again that when about limitation, you make an explanation, the judge will say nothing, he will say it is within time as per pleadings. 3 years has expired, you got a knowledge after 3 years of a forged, fabricated document, you can say I got the knowledge of it. You have to give explanation only at the date of filing of the plaint, while filing the plaint. So, if the suit appears to be barred by the limitation, it will be rejected. When now there is a amendment of 1st July 2002 that a plaint has to be filed in duplicate. And before that date, there was no provision like this that a copy of the plaint has to be filed in duplicate. Nobody understands the purpose of doing this, because in this computer life, and where the plaintiff time fixed by the court to correction of the valuation or supplying the requisite stamp shall not be extended unless the court for reasons to be recorded is satisfied that the plaintiff was prevented by any cause. The court can excuse and exempt the time also. The court has called upon to do act, you have not done within the time, and you can come before the court, kindly extend the time, or already time has been expired, kindly excuse me, I have a sufficient cause for doing so, then that is the plaint will be rejected. But how the plaint is returned, that is provided in Rule 12. That is a complete procedure. And Rule 13 provides if your plaint has been dismissed under Order 7 or 11, all technical grounds, then you can again file a suit informing the court that where rejection of plaint does not preclude presentation of fresh plaint. The rejection of plaint on any of the grounds herein before mentioned shall not be its own force preclude the plaintiff from presenting a fresh plaint in respect of the same further. You filed a suit, the judge told you to pay the court fees, you have not paid. Well, it is rejected. They are told it will not preclude you, the cause of action is a live provided, it is with a limitation, and then it is granted to you. But when you file a suit, there are certain things to be vouched. I have already told jurisdiction, limitation, if filing against the state. That is also another point, that if you file against a public sector corporations, public utilities, which have a different act, as there is in Delhi, there is a Nagar Nigam Adhiniyam, everywhere municipal board has been enhanced to Nagar Nigam. There is a provision in the act that no suit shall be filed against them without serving a notice. It is also provided in the Waqf Act 1995 that you will not file a petition against me without serving a 2 months notice. This is also provided in the state. So these facts you have to look. Now next point what you have to look is that you have to come to the Order 17 Rule 14. Is the documents which are under your possession, you have to file it. This is, it is rather shown as a mandatory, but it becomes directory later on, because the people used to file later on. So under Rule 14, where the plaintiff sues upon a document or relieves upon document in his possession or power to support of his claim, he shall enter such documents in a list and shall produce in court when the claim is presented by him, and shall at the time deliver the document and a copy thereof to be filed with the plaint. So you have to file a duplicate copy of the documents. Where any such document is not in possession, if the documents are not in possession of the defendant, you have to write in the plaint, sir, this document was executed and this document is in possession of the plaintiff and I cannot produce at the time of filing of the same. So it also further shows that you can file a documents later on, and you can also file a suit on lost negotiable instruments. You have, if the suit is for business purposes, something, if the customer is coming to you and you file a suit on accounting, so you have to file a production of shop books. If you don't produce, you can file a copy of it and certify that it is a true copy of it. And nowadays the computerized copies are being filed, certified under section 65B subsection 4, that it is a true copy and computer has been under my control and it is a correct copy of it, that we do it now. If the document is inadmissible, and that will be returned to you, that you will vouch at the time of filing the bill. And you have to further see the place where you have to file. That is the first question for vouching. Suppose you are filing a suitable property which is situated in Kerala, and your clients come to you at Delhi. He says, file a suitable property. What is the suit? Is my tenant is not vacating. So we don't have a jurisdiction, court will not have a jurisdiction. There are 15, 16, 17, 20 acts, sections where place of suing is provided. It is from section 15 to 20. Place of suing, immovable property, that place you have to see. Then you will write the name of the court. So these 5 things you have to vouch before you go to court with a document called plate, which if reported correct shall be registered as a suit, and that other sections of the CPC will come into play, how the summons will be issued, how the summons is served, and then how the defendant is called upon to produce the document, and what is the time limit for the defendant for filing the document, and what is the effect if the WS is not filed within that period. If it is a commercial transaction, commercial act, it is a commercial court, no exemption. If it is a civil court, then court has a power under section 148 and 151 CPCs to extend the time and to take the written statement of record also. Then we proceed further. We discuss the contents and ingredients of the plaint. We also discussed what points we have to vouch. We have to further discuss the points which you want to write in the plaint. The points or the facts. That is called pleadings. For that purpose, there is Order 6 of the Civil Procedure Code, which defines the pleading. What the Supreme Court says, I will just read down a sentence. Pleadings being foundation of litigation must contain only relevant material by excluding irrelevant and unnecessary information. So what the pleading will be, there should be material relevant information required for the case. You will not write all irrelevant things. The pleading has to be made only on facts and not to plead evidence. You can't say that I got this evidence. The rule 2 says, every pleading shall contain only a statement in a concise form of the material facts on which the party pleading relies for his claim or defense, as the case may be, but not the evidence by which they are to be proved. Dates, sums, numbers shall be expressed in pleading in figures as well as words. So you have to put the dates for everything. This says there was a king who died. No, there was a king, he born on so and so, he became young on so and so, he took the charge on so and so and died on so and so. Dates you have to put, material facts. Then thereafter you have to see that particulars to be given when necessary. Suppose there is a fraudulent action of the defendant in some matter, there is some misrepresentation by the defendant, which under section 17 of the Contract Act you want to plead, because Contract Act is a very important everywhere. You say that the defendant has committed misrepresentation, you have to plead effectively by day, date and events. So there can be condition precedent also, any condition precedent the performance. If you have gone through the special effect or to certain provisions of the Contract Act, where the agreement depends upon the reciprocal obligation of the parties. You do this, then I will do this. That's called reciprocal obligation. In Contract Act, you give a contract to the contractor and you write there that I will give you a site for construction, and you don't give a site for constructions, then the contractor has performed his part of obligations and you have failed to perform your part of obligation. That is called reciprocal, which depends upon each other. If that condition is there, you will also place that there was a promise of reciprocal obligations by each other. I have performed my part of obligations. It is the defendant who has not performed his part of application. Then we have to remember, once we plead and place before the judge and the suit is admitted, we can't amend or vary or raise any new ground without the permission of the court. That is provided in Order 6, Rule 7, departure. No pleading shall, except by way of amendment, raise any new ground of claim or contain any allegation of fact inconsistent with the previous pleadings of the party pleading the same. On that there is a law, there can be inconsistent pleadings and you can contest it. Now the law is, but the section is still there. Thereafter 8, Rule 8, denial of contract. If there is a document, you have to specifically admit or deny in your claim. No, the document I do not admit that document. Where a contract is alleged in any pleading, a bare denial of sum by the opposite party shall be construed only as a denial in fact of the express contract alleged or of the matters of fact from which the same may be implied, and not as a denial of the legality or sufficiency law of such contract. You have to plead, not only law. You have to plead, I have not signed this contract also. Effect of document to be stated. The documents have to be filed and you have to tell these documents are in possession of the defendant plaintiff. The same is malice. If there is some wrong in the mind of defendant, wherever it is material to allege malice, fraudulent intention, knowing or other condition in the mind of any person, it shall be sufficient to allege the same fact without setting out the circumstance which the same to be informed. You have to set out. Simple, give a hint. If there was a malice in the mind of the defendant while entering into contract under the Contract Act. Then there is a implied contractor relations about that. If there are certain conditions and you say that these conditions implies with some other condition which is not written, you can also mention that. Whenever any contract or a letter between any person is to be implied from a series of letters or conversation as otherwise from a number of circumstances, it will be sufficient to allege such contract or relation as a fact, and to refer generally to such letters, conversations or circumstances without setting them out in detail. And if such the case, persons of pleading desires to lie on the alternative upon more contract or relation and then is to be implied from such circumstances, you may state the same in the alternative. So this is very clear. If you want on the implied conditions of the contract, you have to plead that it was implied in that. Pleadings to be signed, that is very important. Order 16, Rule 14. What you have stated as a fact in your plaint before cause of action, valuation and jurisdictional relief are pleadings. Now you have to consider in your mind that all these pleadings has to be verified under Order 6, Rule 14 and signed under 14 and has to be verified by a plaintiff, which part of pleading is correct or not. That is Order 6, Rule 15, verification of pleadings. So we have to read both along with each other. Pleading to be signed. Every pleading shall be signed by the party and is pleaded, if any, provided that where a party pleading is by reason of absence or for other good cause unable to sign the pleading, he may sign by any person duly authorized by him to sign the same, or to sue or defend on his behalf. Suppose plaintiff is not here, he is given a power of attorney, authority letter to sign to somebody. He can also sign the pleading. There are two things. Your plaint is finished at the relief, and then you have to sign the pleading under Order 6, Rule 14. And side by side, you have to apply Order 6, Rule 15 also. Verification of pleading. Thereafter, you will write, okay, myself, so and so, plaintiff aforesaid, do hereby verify that the parasuants of the plaint are correct from personal knowledge, and para so and so from record, and para so and so from legal advice received, and I truly verify the pleadings. That's called pleading. So question is, where you are an officer of the department, you have file only, you don't have a personal knowledge of the fact, you will say, yes, I have got a knowledge of the facts from the information received from the file and from the documents on the record, and they have to be filed in the court, because your knowledge depends upon the said record. And whatever lawyer says you about valuation and jurisdiction, you go to a lawyer and ask about it, the lawyer will say you sign it, he will sign, but who is responsible for jurisdiction and court fees? And that you sign on legal advice. Jurisdiction, cause of action, or any other class which you want, you have to say, I am signing it on the legal advice received by me, which I verily believe to be true. Verily believe to be true, legal advice has to be brought to be true. So these provisions has to be contained in the pleading. Then there are the striking of pleadings. If you are irrelevant, scandalous pleading you have done, then there is a provision for amendment of pleading. As I said earlier, that you can't delete anything. You will move a proper application under Order 6, Rule 17. Sir, there is a typing error. Sir, I left a point. Sir, these documents could not be filed by mistake. Then you can say there is a subsequent event also. That's Order 6, Rule 17 applies. There is a full judgments on the record, Order 6, Rule 17, that it should be very liberal in granting the amendment in the plaint or the written statement. And liberality is given by the Supreme Court also, because he is simply saying a fact which the defendant has to deny or accept and then go for a trial. If the plaintiff want to add something and it does not cause injury to the defendant, and stage is preliminary stage, and issues have not been framed, then the court liberally grants the amendment. There is a lot of ruling on this.